All right, finally, after I don't know when the last time is that I went live, probably back in February when I released Oasis. But I've been very, very busy over the past, I don't know, month and a half, however long it's been. I think the last time I went live was when I reviewed the Memotron keyboard, which is over on my YouTube channel. Um, but I've been very, very busy with a bunch of projects, including a mini tour that lasted probably I think I was away for about a week and a half. That kind of took precedence over everything else. But now that that's done with and things are kind of settling down, at least for the moment, I'm able to kind of pay a little bit more attention to my YouTube channel. So this stream is a requested one. I can't remember if it was somebody on Facebook. I think it was. But somebody asked me about my mixing and mastering process. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to mix a couple of different tracks. I guarantee you they're ones that I've done before. Excuse me. They're songs that I've done before. One of them probably hasn't been released yet. But I wanted to see about doing an instrumental one and then a vocal one. So you get a little bit of both. So how do I handle my instrumental stuff and then how do I handle stuff with vocals? So you'll see how audio gets handled, et cetera, et cetera. So my mixing and mastering process. Well, let's start with the mixing first. There's a lot of different schools of thought when it comes to mixing. And for those that don't know what the mixing process is, when you record a song and you record all the different parts, whether you record a band in real time, each instrument is going to have its own lane or its own track. You could look at it as, let's say you have 4 tracks. You can look at it as 4 lanes on a highway. Each of those lanes, each of those tracks is going to have either an instrument or a vocal on it. Now, back in the early days of recording, and I'm not going back to like the 20s, I'm going back to maybe the 40s and 50s when you started recording with analog tape, and it was just, I think it was just 1 track or 2 track. You had no way to balance each instrument and each vocal. You had to do it in real time. So you would have singers moving, closer to the mic or away from the mic. That's how you controlled your volume, back in the day, especially when you had like a group of singers. And this is before even the idea of having a mixing console came into play. But even then, when you have a mixing console and you're only recording the 2 track, you're balancing things in real time. So a mixing engineer used to be called a balancing engineer, at least in the early days of Abbey Road Studios. But in the early days, you had 2 tracks of recording, and then it evolved into having 4 tracks. So you could have 4 different instruments, 4 different vocals. And then the idea came where you could take these 4 tracks and you can combine them or bounce them down to 1 track. I'm trying to keep this explanation as simple as possible. I'm not going to go into too much detail. There's all kinds of information out there. if you wanted to break this down even more. But the idea of bouncing multi-tracks down, basically you take 4 tracks and then you combine them down to one. When you do that, you have the other 3 tracks, and we're talking about a 4-track recorder. You have the other 3 tracks to add more stuff. Here's the thing, you can't go back to those original 4 tracks and mix them again. So you're kind of committed to it. But 4 tracks then later became 8 tracks, which then became 16, which then became 24. So we're getting into the 70s and 80s. And even after that, then you could get into linking multiple tape machines together. So I'm not even talking about computer recording. I'm talking about recording with tape. If you could link with something called SMPTE code on the 24th track, you could link multiple tape machines together, and that's what Toto did when they recorded Africa. I think it was 3 24-track tape machines all synced together, with this last track being the time code. In the case of Africa, I think it was SMPTE, but don't quote me on that. But now we get into, so once that evolved, once everything gets recorded, now you can go back and you can balance things out. Some things need to be quieter, some things need to be louder. You also have the idea of recording in stereo, which means you have 2 speakers, you have a left and a right. So things could be panned, which is, short for panorama. Things could be put somewhere between the left and the right speaker. It doesn't just have to be dead center. So it creates a bigger space to have things, to bring things in and out. So you have volume control over everything. You have panning or, balancing. We call it panning, going from left to right. You then can add effects like compression, EQ, maybe some delays, some reverbs, things, like that. To really add some spice to the sound. Do I like Bose or C? Never used a loop station. I have never used I've never done any live looping at all. I think I've messed around with I forget who makes the Ditto looper. I think that was TC Electronic. I messed around with one of those like way, way back, but it's not my main thing. But anyway, so what am I getting at? Okay, so that's the mixing process. We'll talk about the mastering later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let me see here. Give me 1 second. I don't know why all right. I don't know why my watch is going off. All right. So I've got a session pulled up here in Studio One, and I'm basically just going to go, before I bring it up, I'm going to go ahead and remove everything, like all the effects and whatnot. Give me 1 second here, and then we'll go into here. Okay. Oh, wow, you're watching me from way far away. Well, good to have you here. All right, so my mixing process, and I'm going to just drop everything down to 0. We'll talk about. So when I am recording a song or when I'm writing a song, I tend to mix everything in real time and, kind of mix as I go, as I'm kind of hearing the song in my head. Sometimes when I'm playing or when I'm writing, Oasis, for example. So if I'm working on a song like Oasis, we're actually going to do Coastline, which is on that same album. But as I'm writing the song, the sonic picture is kind of automatically, I would say automatically, kind of being painted in my head of, how I want things to sound, what I want basically what I want the entire scope of the song to be, sonically speaking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, let me see here. I just got to do a couple other things here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Studio One here. So my DAW of choice is Studio One. Obviously, there's Pro Tools, there's Cubase, there's Ableton Live, there's Logic, there's GarageBand, there's Cakewalk Sonar, Studio One, which I'm using here. There's Digital Performer, there's Reason. The DAW doesn't matter. What really matters is what workflow are you comfortable with. Me, I was a Cakewalk user for the longest time. I also used Reason for quite a bit. Well, I can't quite see that. You're talking about always my sad face. Anyway, give me 1 second here. So I've been using Cakewalk probably since high school, since the days of Pro Audio 9. I then ended up getting like one of the earlier versions of Sonar, probably 5 or 6. I then moved over to Reason for a while when I wasn't doing anything audio-wise. I was kind of doing everything within the Reason workflow. And then I moved back over to Cakewalk. And then I've been using Cakewalk probably from 2011 up until, or 2009, 2010, up until 2023, 2022, something like that. I was using Logic for a couple of things, but I don't know. But since switching over to Studio One and getting used to this workflow, I really, really like it. I like it a lot. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my, go to this window over here, which is going to bring up my Studio One. Oh, thanks. I mean, There you go. All right. So here we are in Studio One. And like I said, I tend to mix while I'm writing and recording the song. As the picture is being painted in my head. And then I'll be, like, for example, okay, this brass sound needs to kind of go over to the left a little bit or whatever. Or maybe I need to do a double track on something, put one left and one right. But, so this is the session that I have. But let me go back to my main camera for a second and talk about a couple of things. So when I mix, like I said, I mix in real time while I'm writing a song. If I'm doing something from scratch, my number one question and the number one thing I look out for is this. Has everything been recorded properly? Do I have a good sounding recording to begin with before I even start the mixing process? I mean, quite honestly, the better the recording you can get, depending on what microphone you use, what instruments you use, what preamps you use, whether you print, compression or EQ or anything like that. If you go through other effects before you hit, your preamp and your interface. Um, whether you have things properly set as far as the gain, the input gain on whatever instrument you're recording or whatever microphone you're recording, is your input gain set properly. If things are recorded, as well as they can be, there's really very little fixing or correcting that I probably would need to do in the mix. And that's a term that, that's a term in the in the recording world called fix it in the mix. And that's if you've got a bad recording and you have to go and you have to analyze it and clean it up as best as you can before you can even start mixing. I don't like doing that. I really don't like doing that. Yeah, Facebook messages. I'll get back to you in a little bit. I'm streaming right now, right? Anyway. It really depends on. I'm addressing a question here in the chat. Is Studio One better or Cubase? It really depends on what workflow you want to go. Cubase, I would consider to be one of the big industry standards, even though I hate the term industry standard. You like what you like. It's the same thing with clothing, right? I like, shorts and I like sleeveless. You like what you like, I like what I like. What might work for somebody might not work for me. Like, so if, Pro Tools works for, for this other engineer, over here, it might not be my thing. It might not be what I like. You have to, the best advice I can give you is to try both. Studio One, there's a bunch of products out there that come with a light version of Studio One. You can also get the PreSonus subscription, which I think is Studio One Plus. I forget what the price is. I think it's either $14.99 or $19.99, but just buy a month of it and see what you think. I don't know that Cubase has any kind of trial on it, but I'm sure it's out there. You can probably Google it. Oh yeah, and FL Studio has its own thing. Like, I know it does audio recording, but it was last time I tried FL Studio, this is probably in the days of like FL10. I couldn't even wrap my head around even getting a simple audio track in there. But anyway, so I like Studio One. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. I like things to be recorded as well as they can be. The right microphones, hitting the preamp, if it's a good sounding preamp. I've got an XR18 that has Midas preamps in it. I really like it. I get a nice clean sound out of it. Is it hitting the preamp with enough gain where the signal to noise level is as wide as you can get it? So basically, when you're not hearing anything, the noise level is as low as you can get it. When things are recorded well, the mixing process is a lot easier. Then you're not using EQ to fix stuff. You're using EQ more for color. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into Studio One. Yeah, I got two computers over here. I'm running StreamYard from my laptop here. There we go. So I'm going to go back in Studio One. I'm just going to start bringing things in one thing at a time, and we'll just see what we have. Now, I want to make sure that things are labeled so I know where everything is. So as you can see, I've got 3 different wave stations over here. Give me 1 second here. What I'm also going to do is take any external MIDI tracks like these, and I'm going to pack them into a folder. And I'm just going to move it out of the way, out of sight, out of mind. All right, you. No, you can go away. There we go. Okay. So, here we are. So I'm going to start playing this, and I'm going to just start kind of bringing stuff in. So typically when I get a mix from scratch, I very rarely take any projects on, from outside. Very rarely does somebody bring me anything to mix. Not really what I do, but if I was going to do that, then I would basically start with everything at zero and start soloing stuff and figuring out what that particular track is. It should already be labeled, if I'm importing a bunch of WAV files, those should already be labeled. And also, before I get any further, if you're mixing in the box like we are here, sure, I could point and click with a mouse, but I absolutely find it tedious. I like having a control surface. I'll actually go back to my main camera so you can see what I have in front of me. I have a PreSonus FaderPort 16, and this works beautifully with Studio One in that I don't have to install anything. I don't even have to go into Studio One and set up any drivers, any input, output, MIDI stuff as far as this goes. Because it's a PreSonus product and so is Studio One, Studio One will automatically see this. At least it did when I first got it. It automatically saw this and it automatically was like, oh, okay, here you go. You can also go in. You can also go into like the backdoor settings on this, and I can't remember how to do it. I think you have to power it on to go into a setup mode, but you can adjust the response time of the faders, which is really nice. Jack, how are you? But you can have them move slow. You can have them move very, very fast. I've got them set to where I like them. That was like one of the first things that I did. But it's basically a giant mouse. It's a rather expensive giant mouse, but it's a giant mouse. That's all this is. If I was going to mix on an analog desk, I would need an interface setup with multiple outputs, like 16 or even 32. I would prefer 32 if I was going to go back to using an analog desk. But there's stuff about an analog desk that I really, really like. But I digress. All right, back to Studio One. There we go. All right, so here's Studio One. I'm going to turn off the browser. I'm going to turn on the mix window. So here's my mix window. And you can see all of the tracks are color coded. Basically matches tracks up here in the track view. And then all the way to the right is my master bus. And then you can see where the one fader is up over on the fader port. That's my master bus. All right, so the very first thing I'm going to do, and I was shown this a while ago by a very good friend of mine who's been a recording, a producer, a songwriter, a musician, an engineer for the better part of 40 years. So she showed me this trick. The first thing you want to do before you do anything, as far as mixing goes, or maybe even recording, but I would say mixing. Recording for me, I'd rather not have any plugins if I can help it, if my computer can, kind of handle that. First thing I'm going to do is take a limiter and go into and add it into the post window over here. So this is where all the post effects go. And I'm going to set the threshold to -6. Yeah, color channels. This is also something that I don't think Pro Tools has this, although I think you can do that. But the nice thing, I think Logic does it automatically, but Studio One has been doing it since version 7, which is what this is. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this as a new version. So I'm just going to call this Coastline 2, just so I don't mess up the original mix that I had. All right, so what I'm going to do is set the limiter to -6, and the nice thing about the nice thing about the about these plugins is I'm able to customize a -6 dB preset and then have it load up as the default preset. So that's one less thing I have to do. Yeah, I don't like Pro Tools. I've never liked it. You kind of have to be a rocket science major in order to really run it. But that's a whole nother video, like how to choose, what DAW is right for you. The one that is right for you, in my opinion, is the one that gets you making music as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I would say for the last 3 years, it's been Studio One. All right, so there's my limiter. But what that's going to give me is it's going to give me a little more headroom, a little more, room with the faders. Almost like you're kind of working with an analog desk. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the playback, and we'll just see what we have here. First fader should be bass. As soon as it starts. So that's easy bass. I'm going to just go to -6. Okay, second track is a pad. I'm actually going to rearrange these. I'm going to put the drums over next to my bass. Again, I'm going to bring that up to -6. There's the drums. Now we'll bring up that pad. So right now I'm just listening and seeing what each track is. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the piano over here. There's the piano from Pianoverse. There's a wave station. Just going to rename it. Oh wow, I'm not even using the third one. What was that? I'm curious. What is the third one? No, it's just a pad. Well, we'll leave that one alone. So we're not using that. Anyway. Yeah, the Korg Oasis PCI. All right, now that I know what all the tracks are, let's start building this mix. So I'm going to start again with just the bass and the drums. Now I'm actually going to go right up to unity with the... Actually, no, we'll stay at -6, because I might compress some stuff later. All right, bring the piano in. See, already that sounds good. But again, I'm using quality, software instruments and quality sounds. So there's really very little I think I need to do. What I do like to do is some compression. And on this particular track, not a lot, but just to tame down dynamics, just like the tiniest bit. Just to take a little bit of the edge off. I mean, definitely on the piano. Now, normally I would solo something out, but in this case, I want to hear it in the context of the track, especially if I'm compressing something. So I'm going to go back to the start of this. There's a ton of different compressors I can use. I could use the stock one that comes with Studio One. That's a decent one. I can also use the C1 comp, but then I got a ton of other ones down here too. I could use an Abbey Road compressor. I really just want it nice and transparent. I'm not going to add too much color to this. I can already hear the bass needs a little bit too. I'm going to go to a 1.5 to 1 ratio. But I'll explain what that is in a minute. I'm going to actually go to 2 to 1. Now, what I just did with the ratio, what that means is, I think, for every decibel that it goes over this threshold point, that the volume goes over this threshold point, I think it ducks it down 2 in the case of a 2 to 1. I'm going to back it off and go to a nice gentle 1.5 to 1. And also, if I hold the shift button down and click and adjust, actually no, it's control. If I hold control, click and adjust, I can get a finer you can see over here in this meter what that ratio did. It's a little bit more gentler. So definitely there's still dynamics there, but there's still, the point is there's still dynamics. They're still loud and soft. I didn't overdo the compression, and unfortunately, it's something a lot of producers do. Is they like to crush things, but again, it depends on the song you're doing. If you're doing a heavy rock track and you want that modern sound, then basically crush everything into oblivion. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy this compressor over to the bass. And we'll do a 2 dB makeup gain. So what I just adjusted there is called the makeup gain. So what happens is when you compress something, the volume gets quieter. So most compressors, hopefully all of them, provide what's called a makeup gain to make up for the volume that is lost during compression. So in this case, I set it to a 2 dB gain, which brings the whole overall volume back up a little bit. And it also brings the soft dynamics up in volume a little bit. And we're on the bass track doing this. So this is it, the bass without the compression. And this is it with it. I don't mind doing a 1.8 to 1 compression there. So I do like my bass nice and even. All right, what about the drums? So all right, so let's talk about these drums. So I'm using Superior Drummer 3. And if I open that up, the nice thing about it is it has its own built-in mixer. So I can go ahead and do a drum mix right in here. The other thing I can do too is Superior Drummer 3 has the ability to have multiple outputs too. So I could output, like, say, the bass drum to a channel, the snare drum to a channel, and I could mix the drums in Studio One, and use, the other plugins that I like to use. I find that for my purposes, I don't really need to do that, because I think there's plenty of things in here that allow me to get the drum sound that I'm after, as far as Superior Drummer, and Superior Drummer sounds good anyway. And it also has some built-in, a few different built-in effects and things like that you can add. Let's see. You can also move, the channels around and things like that too, if you wanted to do that. Okay, I go to properties, so that's this. I actually could install the bleed from, other different instruments. So basically what that is when you hit the bass drum, you'll kind of hear it in some of the other microphones, like the tom mics, and it kind of gives it a more realistic sound. I just haven't needed to adjust that yet. But I'm going to go back in. Let's go back to the beginning here. And there's not a whole lot. Solo the drums here. Yeah, for this kind of a tune, so these are all my buses over here. Yeah, and typically I don't like using a hi-hat mic. I think it's a little too much. When I record a real drum kit, I like letting the overheads take care of the hat. I've always gotten good results with that anyway. I also never use a bottom snare mic when I record acoustic drums. I don't need it. So you can see I've got the inside bass drum mic. They do, but in the context of the mix, that ambience will get lost. I can always bring them back in. And also I've got the overhead mics down a little bit too. I've just never liked the sound of using a hat mic. And the drums are like very, very subdued. They're not like in your face. If I was doing a rock track, I would probably bring that hat mic in. But when I record a real acoustic drum kit, I don't need one. I usually let the overheads take care of that, and they do a pretty good job of it anyway. All right, so let's see what this sounds like in the context. See, the thing is, if I bring that hat mic in, it's going to be too much hat. And I kind of like this. I kind of like them more ambient anyway. It almost sounds like a shaker, if you know, instead of a hi-hat. And I think for this tune, it works quite well. Now, yeah, bringing the side stick down. About that, I am gonna put the tiniest bit of compression on this kit, and it's really just gonna take the edge off of that side stick and possibly the kick drum, you know, a little bit, and it's going to bring everything else, might bring everything else up a little bit, and it'll glue the kit a little bit more together. Now, there's two ways to, you know, compress a drum kit, a full, you know, drum mix. One is what I'm about to do is basically just put a compressor on the whole thing. The other is called parallel compression. What in the world is that? Well, I can show you both. All right, how do I want to do this? All right, here's what we'll do. There's two ways to do parallel compression here. And what that means is I'm going to combine the raw drum mix with a compressed drum mix. With a 100% compressed. Doing it this way, Let me see. If I add a bus channel, I'm just going to call it. I'm just going to call it crushed drums because I am going to compress them. All right. So now that I've created a bus, I'm going to send that whole drum mix to this bus. Now, when you're doing acoustic drums, what you're going to do is you're going to send all those drum channels to a bus. You're going to send that bus to another bus, kind of like what I'm doing here. So think of this, think of Superior Drummer as your main drum bus. I am going to take that and send it over to this bus, which is my compressed drums. I am then going to insert a compressor on here. The one that I like to use when I do any parallel compression, and this is merely an example, I'm not going to keep this, is we're going to use this guy. So the compressor is basically a software recreation of the Empirical Labs Distressor. I've never used a real one, but I love the way this sounds on drums. And we want to make sure that it is set to 100% wet. Now, the quick and easy way to parallel compress it is to just take this and insert it right on the drum bus. But instead of balancing with the two faders, with the clean drums over here and the compressed drums over here, you'd balance between the dry and the wet with the dry and wet knob. That's the easier way to do it. What does the number 5 represent on the dials? That just basically means it's halfway. You're halfway up. So 0 to 10. This compressor does not go to 11. So that basically means everything is set right smack dab in the middle. Any way to know the milliseconds? As far as latency, this isn't a delay. This is a compressor. So we're compressing the drums down. All right, let me just see something here. Okay. So that's sending over here. Now what I'm looking to do Now what I want to do is I want this Wait a minute, hang on a minute. Okay, why am I not hearing anything now? Oh, muted. All right, that's what I wanted. So I want that send to go pre-fader. If you're talking about the attack. Oh, okay. I don't think this tells you in milliseconds. But you can hear what happens. But when I'm doing a rock track, I like flipping this switch here. It really just makes it absolutely aggressive. You can hear what that does. So this is what's happening. Yeah, you just have to listen. Honestly, and I don't mind that. because it kind of forces you in a way, in a good way, to use your ear more than, say, a visual setting. Now I'm going to blend it in with and now you can really hear what happens. So I'm going to turn that back on. Now I'm going to bring up the dry drums. And now you hear what happens. So I would do this for a rock track, but for something like this, I'm not going to parallel compress because I do want to keep the dynamics of these drums Yeah, it does. It does. It does compress quite a bit. But that's one of those things where if you turn the release down, it'll fix that a little bit. Um, but what I wanted to do, my original plan was I just want to take the edge off. So I'm gonna take a compressor, and this is the Waves. Which one is this? The C1. So this is a good, bare bones basic compressor. Very transparent sounding. So we'll solo the drums. Hang on a minute. No. Just making sure it works. All right, let's go to I'm not sure why my hang on a minute. I'm gonna try the stock one. Something's happening where I'm not. Yeah, that one works. Let's try the C1 again. Yeah, I'm not getting any metering at all. I don't know why. Ah, there we go. It's because the track was armed. That's one of the things I'm not a fan of. Yeah, I love the Wave stuff. It's so good. One of the things I'm not a fan of with Studio One is when you select the software instrument, it'll automatically record enable it. And so when something is armed for recording, you're not going to see anything here as far as your metering goes inside the plugin. I also have an extra buffer in here as far as my CPU power. And so I've got a dropout protection and I've got it set to maximum. So what happens is when a particular software instrument is armed for recording, it kind of bypasses any plugins that you have up here. It also drops your volume down quite a bit. Well, depending on how much compression you have. If you go to my Bandcamp page, which is justinhaveyu.bandcamp.com, you'll hear some of my instrumental stuff. I would say it's more like the contemporary, somewhat jazz. I'm mainly a contemporary Christian singer-songwriter. I do have some of that stuff up on Bandcamp with the Hideaway album, and I'm working on a new album that is, contemporary Christian, but my own style. I would consider that flavor Toto meets early Michael W. Smith. That's kind of my thing. As far as my instrumental stuff, you probably could compare most of it to, say, the Rippingtons or Yellow Jackets, two kind of jazz, smooth jazz fusion bands that I really, really like. But I would say those two, as far as what my stuff sounds like. But anyway, so what was I doing? Oh yes, so I was gonna take the edge off of these drums. So I'm gonna just do a 1.5 to 1 ratio. Like I said, if I hold the control button down, the control key down, I can fine tune where I want that. And we're just gonna I'm just going to bring that make up. There we go. Now we'll unsolo it. And if that side stick seems a little loud, as when I start bringing other things in, it'll definitely change the way that side stick sounds. So now we're going to bring in the pad, courtesy of the Korg Triton plugin. We'll just stop right there. Let's I'm going to come back here. We're going to start bringing in this 2600 brass. So this was done with a Behringer 2600. Go back to that. I'm gonna throw it just off to the right a little bit. Okay, and I've got this organ pad from the MX61, so I'm going to bring that in. That one, I'm going to go to the left a little bit. Probably about equal to what I did with the 2600 brass. Bring in this wave station. Where is it? So it sounds good, this wave station part. This wave station part, I'll solo it so you can hear it. going to do a couple of things with this sound. I'm going to go ahead and EQ it a little bit. I'm going to make it, I want to get it a little bit brighter. Now, here I'm not going to fix anything as far as EQ. I might go back and listen again to that piano, and I might drop maybe the low mids a tiny bit. But again, I'm not trying to fix any recording issues as far as, like, you know, really bad frequencies or anything like that with the EQ. Right now, I'm just using it for a little bit of color. Now, EQ can be a very... EQ, as far as I'm concerned, is a really subjective thing. A lot of people really like to boost a lot of stuff. I don't. I'm just going to make this smaller here. This is the Infinity EQ from Slate Digital. My favorite EQ plugin of all time. A lot of people like to over EQ. I'm not a big fan of that. And honestly, when you have things recorded, you know, well, you shouldn't have to do a lot of EQing. Honestly, for me, as far as my ears go, too much EQ can really take the life out of a sound. Especially something like a piano. Now, let's see. How do I want to show you this? So what is EQ? EQ is short for equalization. You're basically balancing... you're basically balancing the lows, the mids, and the highs. Typically, you want a nice flat response, you know, on your master. But again, it depends on what kind of track you're making. You know, a lot of people like that scooped mid sound, which I'm not a fan of. A lot of people like a lot of low end, and yeah, if you're doing hip hop or R&B, yeah, I guess, but it gets fatiguing after a while. So what can you do with EQ? Well, I'm actually going to go to the piano and do this example on the piano. So we'll do another EQ on the piano. I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to solo the piano. So if we look at that window... Oh, thank you. This is what the sound of the piano looks like. And you're looking at the entire frequency spectrum. So down here are the lows, so the low end. Here you get to the mid-range, and then here you get to the high end. Now, the nice thing about this EQ is it's fully parametric, which means I can basically pick any frequency that I want to adjust, versus, say, your more common graphic EQ, which on some home stereos you might have a 5-band graphic EQ where you'll have the low mid, the high mid, and the high, and it's basically a graphic representation of what the EQ settings are. It's basically something to look at. And those are fixed frequencies. You cannot change what frequency you're adjusting. Here, you can. So if I just double click, now I've got a frequency. Now there are two things you can do with a frequency. You can cut it, or you can boost it. Now on a parametric EQ, you can sweep it down, or you can sweep it up. And if you're ever in a situation where, you have to do any surgical EQing, like if you've got to say, get rid of this 2 kilohertz frequency, this type of EQ allows you to do that. Now, a good rule of thumb when EQing is you always want to try to cut before you do any boosting. Okay, if you hear any problem areas, get rid of those first. Now, I did say that I hate fixing things in the mix. But I do have a couple of I do have an exception to that, a minor one. If I've only got to fix like maybe one tiny little thing or maybe a couple of things with a track, then I don't mind it as much. For the most part, if the track sounds good, let's say except for this one little frequency over here, then I'm okay. So I'm going to go ahead and play this back again. Now I can already tell you, listening to this piano track, I do want to get rid of some of the mud around here, around the 200 hertz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it a little bit, about 1.5 dB. That's the other thing with EQ. A little goes a very long way. You don't have to do an extreme amount of EQing. I'm actually going to narrow that a little. So on the Infinity EQ, you've got 2 sliders here. You've got one that can narrow the band all the way down to a single frequency if you're doing that search and destroy, kind of surgical EQing if you have to do that. This does it very, very well. You can have up to 20 bands on one EQ. So it's a very, very flexible and very easy EQ to use. Or you can widen it, and you can go pretty wide with it. The other thing I can do is adjust that peak. I can actually widen the peak a little bit, like this. As I move this slider up, watch the shape of that peak. You can kind of see how it's squaring off a little bit. So you can, if you're stuck in that mode where you have to do some surgical EQing, I don't think there's a better EQ out there. There might be, I just haven't found it yet, than the Infinity EQ. All right, so let's. So that's without it. Without. With. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up some of this bottom end, because I don't really play anything down low. So I'm just going to do a gentle do 100 hertz low cut. So now you can see what happens when you go really, really extreme with it, which I don't want to do. Just right around there. I'll have to look into, I'll have to watch some videos on Pro Q4. Who makes that plugin? The other thing I like about this one is it's pretty transparent. The other thing you can do is if you use this as a mastering EQ, you can do some mid-side trickery as well. So if I take this band and I can put it into mid-side mode if I wanted to. Or I can put it into stereo mode. You know, or I can go over here and pick the type of frequency it is. I can even have some dynamic control over that frequency too. I'll tell you what I do like about this piano. I do like that 2 kilohertz. Let's see if I can find it. Now, the only time I'm going to boost up really a lot is I'm looking for a particular frequency. There it is. I'm going to go like that. And just a very gentle. Very gentle scoop right around. See, that's like, yeah, 784, 800, whatever that is. All right. Here it is without. Here it is with. So the tiniest little bit, and I've cleaned up that piano a little bit. So that's kind of a little bit of a demonstration on EQing. Now I'm going to do what I originally wanted to do, and that was to take care of this wave station part here. That part here. I want to brighten that up a little bit. Again, clean up the low end. I'm going to use a very generous low cut. And we're going to brighten it a little bit. Go back and hear that again. Do a 3 dB at about there. I'm going to cut mids ever so slightly, not even a dB. Okay, I like that. I'm going to do one more thing with it. Now, I've got that part sitting right in the middle, but there's some interesting things stereo-wise that I can do with this. What I am going to use, for example, I can use the Waves Doubler 2. And actually, I'll show you what that's going to sound like. So I'll just throw it on there. And again, I've got a default preset here that basically is going to, let me see here. Is that gain all the way up? Yes. Okay. Basically, it's going to put a straight signal on the left and a delayed signal all the way on the all the way on the right. And it's basically going to give it a stereo double. There it is without. There it is with. Here it is without. And there it is with. It actually brings the sound out a little bit more. I'll show you what else I like using for that effect, and it actually thickens it even up, up even more. I like using the Abbey Road Real ADT 2V, which is basically an Abbey Road automatic double tracker. Now, there's two different versions of the plugin. There's the ADT, which is basically it's got one set of heads. This one has two. So this is the stereo version pretty much. All right, so it does make the sound a little more quieter. Now here it is with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to even the levels out. There's the left side. There's the right side. I like dropping this down, and I like bringing this up. And I'm going to put one of them hard left, one of them hard right. I'm going to just start there. Oh, I like that. There it is without. It does tend to quiet the sound down a little bit, so you want to make up for it. There it is with. That's the one I'm going to go with. There we go. Bring that up a little bit. All right, that's sounding quite good. And if the overall mix needs to be brightened, I can do that in mastering. I'll bring the piano up a little bit. Got another wave station part here. Basically a pad. So it's almost a counter melody on this other wave station part. Now for that, I'm going to use the doubler. Widen it out a little bit. Kind of brings that part out a little more. There we go. Tweak a couple of things in piano verse here. I'm also going to take the lid position up a little bit. So now, do you hear how that ending cuts off a little bit? I'm going to fix that in mastering. So now normally what I would do now is if I think I've got it close to what I'm hearing in my head as far as the overall picture and the overall mix, I'd go and listen to it one more time. If I was doing an album, I would be doing it again. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bus compressor on the master and listen to it again. And this I really want to be gentle with. I like a quick attack. Release is okay. Okay, that kick drum's a little much. Drop it down a little bit. I like that. And this is the T-Rex bus compressor, so it's an SSL model. I do have the SSL version. I don't know, I've just been using this one. This has been my go-to. I want it nice and gentle. There we go. I don't want to overdo it. This isn't a rock track. For anything smooth jazz or any kind of jazz fusion, I like to have dynamic range. Now, let's see how I'm hitting that limiter. I'm barely hitting the limiter, so I got a ton of room. That's good. I don't want to hit 0, but I've got some good volume going. That organ can come down a little bit. Bring the floor toms down a little bit. I wish these faders had more room. That wave station can come down. So that's the other thing. Once you put the bus compressor on, you really can change the overall picture of the mix. How long are we going? We're about We're about an hour 25, and I still want to hit mastering. So I think what I'm going to do is I did want to do a vocal song as well. I think I'm going to do that next time. Maybe one of the other streams, because I do have another request for another stream, and that is I think somebody commented on one of my Alesis Quadrasynth videos on the difference between the original one and the Quadrasynth Plus. So that might be the next one that I do. I don't know yet, but one of these times I'll show you how I handle vocals, because that's kind of a process in and of itself. But I think now normally I would basically continue listening to this until I think I've gotten it right. And I know I've gotten it right, so basically when I listen to it, I don't have to make any adjustments or nothing's really jumping out at me. The other thing that I will do is I'll listen at a quieter volume and at a louder volume and hear how the mix translates. The other point I want to focus on too is, what are you mixing on? Are you mixing on speakers or are you mixing on headphones? Personally, I prefer mixing on speakers, but because I'm in an apartment and not a very well soundproofed one, that will be changing in about 4 months, I prefer to mix in speakers because then I can really hear what it sounds like in a more, in a real world environment. I know a lot of people listen to music on headphones and that's fine, but there's probably an equal amount of people that listen on speakers, whether it's in your car, whether you're, out at a restaurant or, in the store, even without even thinking about it, you're listening to music on speakers. Now, whether you listen on speakers or your headphones, when you talk about, how does your mix compare to somebody else's, it is vital, by that I mean extremely important, that you know your speakers or that you know your headphones. You've listened to enough recordings and some different recordings on them at different volumes to hear what they sound like, to hear how they respond. And not only the speakers, but the environment you're in. If you're in a controlled environment, it's a little bit easier to get a mix that translates from the studio to the car, for example. So I have a particular album that I listen to anytime I get on a set of speakers that I'm unfamiliar with, and that is an album by Toto called Tambu. It was released in '95, and I know a couple of production companies that use that album to test their live sound systems, and I do myself. It is such a beautifully recorded album. It has everything that you'd want to hear. It's got, the drums sound great. It was basically an Elliot Shiner mix, I think. But yeah, I mean that particular album is what I use to test the sound system. But I'll also use some smooth jazz. I'll also use some Dream Theater stuff. Well, there's particular, recordings, but I'll also even listen to my own stuff on a new set of speakers because I know what my music's, is supposed to sound like. I try to listen to uncompressed files. So I'll even throw in a physical CD into my system, if I can. Or if I have the album on, let's say, a flash drive as, lossless WAV files. That way you really hear what your speakers and your headphones sound like. I avoid MP3 and I avoid Spotify at all costs, as far as streaming. And I avoid listening on YouTube at all costs because they compress the audio. So it's really important that you know your speakers. If you plan on shopping for, let's say, a set of studio monitors, make sure you get into an environment where you can listen to those speakers, whether you're at a music store like, like Sweetwater or Guitar Center. Sweetwater does have a retail store in Fort Wayne, Indiana. and I'm pretty sure that they have a listening room. But go to a place that has a listening room where you can hear, these studio monitors um, before you buy them. And also, don't be afraid to look at, reviews and not just the 5-star reviews. And if you do buy online, I highly recommend Sweetwater because they have a very good return policy and they've got free 2-year coverage if anything happens to that, anything happens to your monitors or any gear that you purchase from there. So, and the other thing too is their return policy is really good and it's super, super easy. So if you buy a set of speakers, you try them out for, let's say, a couple of weeks, and you decide they're not your thing, you can easily return them and swap them out, or, they'll work with you. Sweetwater will work with you to get, the exact pair of speakers you're looking for. But it's important to know your speakers. Okay. Now that we have gotten that out of the way, let's talk about mastering. All right. So mastering, what is it? It is the final step that a record or a single goes through before it gets released. It's basically prepping it for release. Now, in the olden days, it would be, all right, you'd be using a lathe cutter and you'd be cutting basically an acetate disc. And that would be your master disc, and that would be what all the vinyl gets, duplicated from. Again, this is olden days, and I don't know a whole lot about the history of it, but it's very, very significant. But the idea is to take the mix, and if you go to a mastering engineer, they'll probably add some extra touches to bring that mix to life even more. And those touches could be anything from stereo imaging to multi-band compression, and I'll talk about what that is, to EQing, and also taking the overall volume of the track, and basically getting it loud like every other commercial recording. As I master this track, I'll talk a little bit about, each of those things. But you might also use something like an exciter to brighten up, some top end. An exciter is basically a distortion unit, but it's like a smooth kind of distortion. I actually happen to have one in here. Now I'm curious. What exactly is it? I got the Arturia one here. Yeah, so that's an exciter, and this is basically kind of a mastering tool, but I'm not gonna mess with it on camera. I might try it, I don't know, at some time, but yeah, it is a good idea to do a few. Whether you're going to vinyl, you might want it a little bit quieter, a couple dB. You might want to tame the low end a little bit, depending on whether you're going to 120 gram, 180 gram, whatever. If you're going to Spotify, which is going to compress things even more, you might maybe use a little bit less compression. But yeah, no, you've got a good point there. But I would say, and I have an engineer friend that like I said at the beginning, that has been engineering for 40 years, and she does mastering as well, and she's very good at what she does. She told me once that famous mastering engineer Bob Ludwig, who has a studio up in Portland, Maine, has once said, you shouldn't be able to tell what I did to it after I've done it. So if you've got a good enough mix, the changes that happen in mastering should be so subtle that you can't tell the difference. Oh, Carl. Oh, Carl, good to see you. I haven't seen you in forever. I tried it years ago. Carl's talking about Reaper. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Um, there's some times where I don't have a lot of time, and I like a less cluttered, and there's a lot of setup I feel like you have to do with it. Um, mm, no, you're good. You're on. I talked about DAWs like at the beginning of the stream, so no, you're not really off topic. Um, I'd have to play with it a little more, um, and really wrap my head around the workflow. But I've been using Studio One for like the past 3 years, and the ease of use was just quick. Um, like I said at the beginning of the stream, the right DAW is the one that gets you into that creative mode, making music as seamlessly and as easy as possible. This one has been the go-to for me for the past like 3 years. Well, this and Reason, depending on what I'm doing. I still use Reason. I think I'm up to 13 right now. Um, but the nice thing about Studio One is it's got a clean interface, and that's really, really important to me. Um, mm. Oh yeah, the configure. I'm pretty sure if I got into it, I could find the Studio One config file for it. But for me, let's say I want to jump right in and play some piano. I can just come over here and grab a plugin like Pianoverse, and then just drop it right in. It'll automatically route, my controller to it. There's very, very little setup that I have to do with it. Um, Yeah, it is. It's really nice to look at. I mean, I've got this blue theme. This is one of the preset themes that came with it, and you can edit it, but it's really easy on the eyes too. But the big thing is it's clean. The other thing is, I don't know if you can see in front of me, I've got a Faderport 16. This, because it's a PreSonus, I didn't have to install any drivers. I didn't have to set anything up. Studio One just instantly saw it and then immediately was like, okay, here you go. Here's your control surface. Done. um, yeah, so I mean, I love having this control surface, but I digress. Like my beautiful montage over here. It's, yeah, I love you. All right, mastering. All right, so my mastering chain looks a little something like this. Now, if I'm doing a whole album, I'm basically going to get all the mixing done, and then I'm going to do the album at once. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you probably have to use the Mackie Control Protocol, and I've tried this with Cakewalk, and the Mackie Control Protocol and the fader port just don't sit well together. The faders jump all over the place. It's nowhere near as smooth as it is with Studio One. Mhm. But so when I'm mastering, if I'm releasing a track, like say a single, um, then I'll go ahead and master right within the song file. But if I'm mastering if I'm mastering the whole album at once, um, Studio One has a project file that you can call up. Matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll save this, close out of it, and I'll go to the Oasis project file. Where is it? There it is. Bang. Now watch this. Right at the bottom, there's my album. And if I click on each track can have its own like inserts. Like say if you've got to EQ one track a certain way, you shouldn't have to if things are mixed well and mixed properly. You can also adjust the overall volume of each track too. So if you need to put a limiter, like on say, like if I had to put a limiter on Moonlight, or if I needed to do an EQ, like this one's got an EQ on it, then I can do that. And then down here is my master. So here I can use, a multi-band compressor and EQ. Down here I'll put the Ultra Maximizer. And also in here, I can put the stereo imaging. I can basically master the entire album at once. I can then sequence it and put these tracks in whatever order I want. I can then, if I come up to the top here, you have different options for, releasing. So if you were going to do a digital release, you'd click that button here. If you were going to burn a disc, so this has the capability to burn a CD, you could do that. So it's very, very, very slick. It's also got a beautiful spectrum up here, and you can change, what kind of view you get too. So for example, if I play, I'll play Moonlight. So we'll go to Moonlight. Let me see. No, I don't want to do that. Come here. I don't even want to open the EQ either. There we go. I'm going to drop the volume a little bit. So basically, I've got a 12th octave view, which I quite like. But I can do a 3rd octave. So you got all these different views here. But yeah, I like the 12th octave. My master meter is over here, and then my stereo meter is over here. So in here, it's nice and clean. And then if you come up here, it'll show you how much, how long your album is. And it'll tell you, like, let's say if you're going to CD, you've got an 80-minute max on CD. So that's if I was doing this, as an album at once. But in our case, I'm doing this as a track at once. So I'm going to open up Coastline again. Was it the WLM? I'll have to check that out. But I'll show you what I do. You already saw a couple of things. The very first thing I'm going to do is throw an EQ. And I'm going to go back to my old faithful, the Slate Digital Infinity EQ. Just because it's got a beautiful spectrum on it. All right, where are you? That's right. It starts all the way up here. So this is my master EQ. All right, so I'm going to be very gentle with this EQ. I'm going to try not to go more than a dB and a half a dB or a dB and a half. I'll fix that low end too. I can tame that another way. So that cleans up the mud a little bit. Now for some air. So it's about 2 dB. All right, now I want to talk about one other thing this EQ does, and I mentioned it earlier. These bands can either be basically in stereo mode. You can do a split left-right mode, which is kind of cool. I don't know, I would call it a split, but you can pan that band between left and right, which is kind of cool. I'm going to put it in mid-side mode. What I'm going to be able to do is I can focus this band more towards the center or more out towards the side. So it's going to give me a little bit of stereo imaging kind of built right into the EQ, which is very, very nice. So you can hear the difference. to go more towards the mids. And then the highs, I like to go out towards the sides. Right about there. Up a little bit. There we go. So this is without the EQ. This is with. So you can hear how it brings out those high mids of the piano even more. Gives that piano a little more life. All right, now I'm going to use a multi-band compressor. So what is a multi-band compressor? Well, it's a compressor. We talked about that. Yeah, it definitely does something. Like I said, it brought that top end of the piano out a little more, that high mid, which really brings that part out, more. It's subtle, but it's enough. I didn't go overboard with EQing, and you shouldn't have to with mastering. You really want to be careful when you're doing this. All right, so multi-band compressor. Well, it's a compressor, but it's a compressor for 4 different frequency ranges. You have low, low mid, and high. So it gives you a little more control over each of these ranges. So let's say if you want your mix a little less muddy, I could go into the EQ and use an EQ to do that, or I can do it with this. And if I look over here, right now it's very, very gentle. If I wanted to grab more control over that low end, now I'll go extreme here just for a second so you can hear what I'm doing. So you see how much control I can have over each of these frequencies. So now that cleans it up a little bit more. I'm just turning my headphone volume down a little bit. Yeah, there's a bit of side stick. Yeah, there is a bit of side stick. To my ears, it's sitting where I want it. I mean, I suppose I could go in and EQ it more. I can try bringing it down a little bit. The thing is, I don't like these faders. Yeah, it's sitting nice. The other thing too is adjust your volume. Listen loud and then listen quiet and see what happens. That side stick might come out a little bit more at a quieter volume, or it might come down a little bit more. That's one of the things that I even do when I master is I listen loud and then I listen quiet. I don't like to listen loud for very long because it does get fatiguing to the ears. So a nice moderate volume is good where you're not, if you've got a lot of work to do, you want to be comfortable. All right. Let me see where I'm at with the limiter. going to drop the volume a little bit. All right. Yeah, you can hear the toms coming out a lot. Yeah, see, the thing is, when I start bringing the stick down, everything else starts coming up. Remember, the drums are compressed a little bit. So I really don't want the cymbals up too much. Like I said, that's one of the reasons I don't use a hat mic. Yeah, see, I'm already losing that backbeat. All right, but back to the task at hand. Now we need to talk about overall volume. All right, now we come to a very subjective and opinionated subject. Good thing I got 2 extra cans of Coke to get through this part. Now we get to the overall volume of the track. There is a thing that has been happening since compact discs have come out. And it's a little thing called the loudness war. Oh, this CD's pretty loud. I bet I can make mine louder. And then, oh, I bet I can suck all the dynamic range out of this recording and just brick wall it and give it all kinds of energy. I hate it. I hate the loudness war with a passion. I will not participate in it. That being said, I'm not against having the track, sit at a comfortable, minus 0.1 dB, below absolute zero. I'm not against having the volume of the track, at a reasonable place. But yes, you've hit the nail right on the head. Especially with this kind of music, dynamics are key. They are extremely important. Go listen to, what was the track that I was listening to on the mastering page? Moonlight, which is over on my Bandcamp. I have tried to keep the dynamic range as wide open as possible on that track because dynamics can really bring a song like this or like that one to life. I feel like even a good rock album still has dynamic range. That's one of the problems I have with all of these remasters coming out of like classic albums. Is a lot of them are brick walled into oblivion. It's like, oh, we can make it better because now we're on, now we're going digital. Yeah, but for the most part, I don't know, the ones that I've heard and the ones that I've heard are okay. I still go back to the original recordings. I've got a vinyl of Journey's Escape, a recent one that I picked up at Walmart that was like a limited edition Walmart issue clear vinyl, but it was remastered by, I think it was Adam Ian from Gateway Mastering in Portland. I compared that to an original vinyl pressing, and there's no comparison. The remaster just sounds awful. It's an album that didn't need it, and most of the stuff from the 70s and 80s didn't, they don't need it. Again, when something is recorded as well as you can record it, there's very little you need to do. So yeah, I hate remastering. I hate the loudness war. I absolutely hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. Did I mention I hate it? That being said, we do need to take care of the overall volume of this. Now, the way you would do this on a rock track is you'd use 2 limiters. I'm going to leave this one alone because that's for my my mix bus. I'm going to put one after it. I'm going to use the Waves L1 Ultra Maximizer. I like this one. It's a pretty transparent sounding limiter. And just to avoid any clipping, and we all know about clipping, I'm going to go down to -0.1 to avoid the 0 dB clipping thing, which I know a lot of albums have suffered from. Rush's Vapor Trails, which thankfully got a remix. I haven't heard the remix, but God, the original sounds awful. So typically what you would do is one technique, and one pretty popular technique to take care of overall volume, is you use 2 limiters. The very first thing that this limiter is going to hit are any transients, any attack sounds, like drum sounds. So the first limiter would take care of evening those out. The second limiter would then take care of the overall volume of the track. Like I said, for this kind of music, I don't like using that stuff. Yeah, it does. Like I said, that's something I'll play with off stream. I'm just showing you my personal preference. But all right, here we go. All right, now we're going to start going. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. Now we'll keep going. You can see the bass drum is yeah, that's what I want. I like a -1 dB ceiling. Not even going to touch the release. Yeah, that's the L1 Plus Ultra Maximizer. It's a Waves. I like it quite a bit. So I've kind of taken care of the utility kind of stuff. Now, if I really wanted to, I can get a little bit creative. Let's say I want a little bit more air on this. There's a couple things I can use. Why don't we try a vintage exciter right after that EQ? Just see what happens. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. I have a different tool for this. I'm going to use another Steven Slate plugin called Fresh Air. You can even hear with this one, even just going like adding a 2%, it brings out like the high end, you know, the hi-hats quite a bit. So this is good if you want a little bit more presence, but you don't want to touch an EQ to do it. It's a different sound than using an EQ. So this is without. This is with. Without and with. And I'd probably, if I was doing a whole album, I would probably put this on the whole thing, because I do want consistency across the entire album. Now, also depending on let me see if I have it in here. I think I do. Now, depending on the kind of sound I want, yeah, that's a good way to use them. I like to add just that little touch of extra air. It kind of breathes. It kind of makes the master breathe a little bit, which honestly, in addition to dynamic range, is really important. I probably would back off the maximizer a little bit too. Probably go down to 5 dB. Now, there's another little thing, depending on the track, that I like doing, and that is using a virtual tape machine. I've got a few of them over here. I'm going to go for the T-Rex Tape Machine 80. I'm going to add that right after the Fresh Air. Oh, look at that. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, this 456 model definitely add some low end. Here it is without. Here it is with. Yeah, so what the tape machines do, and it depends on which one, because T-Rax comes with a lot of different ones, and the effects between them, they're very, very, very subtle. But it adds more, I would call it more meat, more bottom end, more low mids. I would say more girth to it. Again, it's like I said, I wouldn't use it on this tune, but depending on the song, if I'm doing a more straight ahead pop melodic rock kind of thing, I would definitely use it. But yeah, it also does, it adds something to the pad too. It kind of glues it even more, so not necessarily a bad thing, but again, it just depends on what you want. And again, the way that I know that I'm done with a master is I take one more listen to it and I'll decide then and there, if I'm good with it, or, I'll know when I'm done when I don't tweak anything. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and listen to this again for one more time. Yeah, we'll go ahead and listen to we'll listen to this one more time, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. It's getting a little late over here. So here we go. Here is... I guarantee you, if you go to Bandcamp and listen to this over on Bandcamp, it's going to sound nothing like this. I'm just illustrating, like I said, like it says in the description or the title, how I mix and how I master. So here we go. Like I said, this is not going to sound like this on Bandcamp because I already put this track out. Bring the volume back up. All right. So I forgot to add one little thing, and I don't really need to demo this, but when you heard that piano cut right out at the end, the way that I would fix that is basically automate this master fader and just fade it out at the end, just to soften that. But other than that, yeah, so that is pretty much my mixing and mastering process. So I hope, let me go back to my main camera here. There we go. So yeah, that's my mixing and mastering process in a nutshell. The only thing I hadn't done was vocals, but that's a whole nother video there. That's when you can get into things like reverbs, delays, double tracking, having fun with that kind of stuff. But maybe I'll do that on another stream. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap that for tonight. Coming up, if it gets delivered tomorrow, I might do an unboxing video. I don't know yet, but we'll see. But I do want to do the comparison between the Alesis Quadrasynth and the Quadrasynth Plus. That was a request. As far as requests go, if it's talking about anything that I've already done, or if anyone wants to know anything more about like my songwriting, or like I said, my mixing, mastering, anything about sound design, things like that. Those kinds of things I can easily do. As far as gear reviews, that would be a little much because I can't really afford a whole lot. I'm financing a lot of the stuff that I use. So the only way I would be able to do a gear review of a keyboard or something is if somebody loaned me one, or if a manufacturer ever sent me one. Yeah, that's a snowball's chance in a microwave of that ever happening. But anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and call it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and thank everybody that'll be watching this on catch up. So now we'll go through I'll go ahead and go through the scripted ending of my videos. So if you liked this stream or any of my other videos or my live streams, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. When you subscribe, click the notification icon. That will let you know when I release a video or when I go live. I am a very busy man. I don't have a set schedule for doing a live stream or releasing a video. I basically can do them when I have time. If you like my music, please head over to my Bandcamp page. Can I put that as a banner on here? Yes, I can. If I just do this, right at the bottom, scrolling along the bottom, is my Bandcamp page. So if you like my music, please head over there and check some stuff out. Make some purchases. It definitely goes towards keeping this whole thing going. And it allows me to be able to continue doing the music and, creating videos and content for you guys. All right, so that is going to do it for tonight. Just reading the comments before I go. Yeah, it was. I did before I go off, I did a week and a half tour, and I mentioned this at the beginning, with Greg X Volts, who was the original lead singer of the Christian rock band Petra. Again, that was a couple of weeks back, so I was away doing that and prepping for that. And then coming back, I had to kind of settle down and kind of get back into the routine of doing stuff before I jumped back onto StreamYard and YouTube and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm back. We'll see what happens over the next few months. But yeah, again, thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.